How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and we have 12 beautiful minutes of Spider-Man 2 gameplay that look absolutely incredible. This is what I was looking forward to most from the PlayStation Showcase, and it did not disappoint. Plenty of the old, exciting features that we know and love from the first game that went over really well, and new features here, whether it's the storytelling, the character development, the new powers and abilities, and of course the story itself. There's a lot to be excited here for Spider-Man 2. I think it's going to be one of the greatest games of this year. I'm definitely looking forward to it. So without further ado, we're going to go into everything that we could pick apart from the 12-minute Spider-Man 2 gameplay reveal. Now, I will be talking over a pretty good chunk of this footage. I'm assuming that you've seen it already on your own. If you haven't, go check that out, then come back here. I'm hoping that you're here to get my thoughts, my impressions, my feelings about what's going on with this game, and I'm going to treat it as such. If you find that annoying, this might not be the video for you. Sometimes I'll also be pointing out obvious things that happen on screen, just par for the course for this type of video. What I will point out right off the bat, getting into the actual gameplay analysis part of this video, is the way that the subtle lighting and shadows are done as this unnamed individual walks through this densely vegetated jungle, which the density of foliage here is impressive on its own. Just where modern games have come, never cease to amaze me. But you could see the individual beads of sweat on his body, on his shoulders, the reflection on his knife, on his gloves, his hair, all reflecting the light differently. It does an exceptional job with its presentation here. And I know that a lot of people have been critical of the visuals of this game. At least I've seen some criticism of the visuals. I think it looks excellent. I think it looks absolutely phenomenal. And you could see in some of these shots here, the subtle facial animations with characters like Kraven, the movements of the muscles that I think are done really, really well.
But you sense nothing.
You could feel the aggression as his face crunches up as he enunciates some of his words. You could feel the pain in this unnamed soldier's face as he's getting choked by Kraven. I really do love Kraven as a villain. I think he's intimidating. One of my favorite types of villains are those that are calm, calculated, precise. They always have a plan. They don't need to yell over the top at their enemies to make their points. Kraven is, at least for now, appearing as such that villain. I also like that his motivations are so much more simple. He's not out to destroy all of Manhattan. He's not out to completely obliterate the world. You have this much more personal story. His goal is to get Peter Parker and he wants Spider-Man. That's it. And he's going to do whatever it takes to achieve that goal. I think there's tons of room in film, media, TV, games, whatever, for those types of stories. It doesn't need to be this overly complex plot, and I'm happy to see it here. So a lot of people have already gone through this quite extensively. I'm going to fly through it a bit. Black Cat featuring what others have pointed out as a new appearance. I'm going to take their word on it. I don't actually remember what she looked like in the first game. Prowler, Wraith, who is Yuri Lowenthal from the first Spider-Man game, also the comics. This is her alter ego. So it's cool that we're going to not only get new character development here, but it's nice to know that she's recognized and probably going to come back. This is an important character in particular, the capacity of which we're not yet sure. Is it going to be in the main story? Is it just going to be for side content? Both, maybe. Who's to say? Tombstone, which was interesting because he actually lost his powers, I thought, in the DLC, or one of the DLCs. I thought he lost his powers, so either this is outdated intel or this particular scene takes place before that actually happened. Keep that in mind. Of course, we have both the Spider-Man here. This one is going to be swapping between a couple different characters. I paused on Doc Ock, but you can see they're actually listed here. Vulture, Rhino, Doc Ock, Electro, and Kingpin. I would be perfectly fine. Those are characters from the first game. If they want to take a seat back, relax. You had your time in the sun. You were in our last game. Let these other guys come up and take center stage. I'm of the opinion that a lot of times less characters generally work better because they can have more screen time. You can tell much more personal stories. You can develop them a lot more. I don't think you need this massive ensemble. I know I'm going to be alone on that because, of course, I mean, you look at Spider-Man, one of Spider-Man's most infamous enemies, the Sinister Six. So there's six on its own, right? So a lot of people are going to have different opinions on that one. I like a much more personal cast of characters. Of course, if this is the complete roster that we're going to see in the game, I think that's perfectly fine, excluding those that are currently incarcerated or locked away. You also have Lizard, which we're going to get a good look at. Taskmaster, who might come back as a side villain. And then up here is Electro. So curious what he's going to be doing. Or, I'm sorry, not Electro. The Shocker. A lot of people get very mad if I got that wrong. Again, just a detail with the sweat beating down his eyes. I like the way the hair was done. I think it looks good too. The wrinkles in his face, the lip movements, and the mouth capture, the facial capture is done exceptionally well. One thing that I do hope we get to see more of is Kraven's character on screen, particularly some of his backstory. I don't necessarily want to be reading it through notes or bios in the menus. I want to see it on screen. For people who haven't really read the comics and don't know who Kraven is, it's going to be great for them. And to see how they just simply differentiate itself from the comics to the games is also something I always appreciate to see. I would like it if it actually took place, not through just reading notes. 6 months later, also, it can help explain why he has all the technology, the followers that he has, and how he's able to fly a helicopter over Manhattan without getting detected. It's kind of an important thing to know. I mean, I'm ready to accept it at face value that, hey, it's a comic book game, shut up. It's fine with me, but it would be nice if some of that was fleshed out. This is a fantastic shot here. It's already confirmed that not only are you going to be swinging through Manhattan once more, but you're also going to be able to take to some of the boroughs around Manhattan, which is absolutely exciting just for the sheer fact that we get a new location. Especially when you consider the movement speed that has increased 1,000,000 times from the last game, which we're going to get a good look at later. Having a bigger map size for that reason is important. And some subtle details to help make it feel alive. You'll notice that there are boats that are moving. They're not just sitting still. Planes in the water. I know we did get some of that in the first game. Thankfully, it continues here. And of course, you have the population density that's featured below. This shot in particular is really well done because you can see the difference between the two regions, the much lower, smaller buildings, a lot more foliage in between them versus Manhattan with its massive, massive skyscrapers. And a nice reference, Midtown High. That's where Peter Parker went to school. This shot is a little bit curious to me. I just wanted to point it out because you have a crowd that's gathering. I like that. There's some people who are just mindlessly walking by. Would expect to see a little bit more folks these days. Seems like everybody would just be up at, 10 feet away trying to record whatever they can with their camera. But I guess maybe in a Spider-Man Manhattan where you have supervillains all over the place, you just know to stay away from these types of things. But this guy in particular, armored car drives into this backyard, military camouflage vehicle, fence broken. We could assume that maybe this was either from the Lizard or possibly Spider-Man himself broke it. Who's to say? The truck path goes through here, so they didn't go through this guy's backyard and crash through the fence. But my dude over here just raking leaves, not a care in the world. Maybe good for him. That's life goals, perhaps, when armed soldiers walk next door to your house. Phenomenal transition into the symbiote suit here. Some people don't like it. I think it looks very appropriate for the game. Not going to go off and say it's my favorite Spider-Man suit in the world, but I think it does look very, very cool indeed. And quite literally and metaphorically, as he jumps out from the basement into the sunlight, out with the old, in with the new. In this case, the symbiote suit being one of the biggest new features for Spider-Man 2. Right off the bat, there's major questions that we need to ask ourselves. How far in the game does this take place? How long has Spider-Man had the symbiote suit? Has he been testing it on the side? Because later on, we're going to see Miles Morales act as though he's never seen it before. Is that dialogue specifically for this gameplay showcase? Have things been altered? Really, really curious about all those details and more. But first off, we can take a look at the way the HUD is done. You have, of course, some new elements. Go a little bit forward here so more things can expand. On the bottom left and the bottom right, all of your abilities, or most of your abilities, are seemingly now mapped to the L1 and R1 buttons, and probably the face buttons on the controller. So you hold down one, click the other. That's how you use your abilities. That's cool because for both Miles Morales and Peter Parker, Spider-Man, you have their unique abilities both mapped to L1, so there's some kind of synchronization there. Then for the shared abilities on R1, It's important. This is a good time to bring up that the way the skill trees have been confirmed to work for Spider-Man 2 is there's actually shared abilities between the characters in the specific gadgets, the Spidey gadgets that are used. So you do not need to upgrade one time for Peter Parker and one time for Miles Morales. That would be tedious, annoying, a grind, and nobody would like it. They do share that skill tree, and then you evolve based on their unique abilities. So that's the way that some of the upgrading and leveling up and skill points do work. Immediately in this opening scene, we have a combo counter, the combo meter that fills up that you use to recharge health or use your finishers. This is going to be the web gauge that we know from the first game, and then of course health. A little bit self-explanatory, but somebody might comment if I didn't point it out. Here we're using this L1 plus square ability. You can see it's highlighted blue. They operate on cooldowns. You'll see that in a little bit, but immediately incapacitates one enemy with that symbiote punch, and then actually both enemies, two enemies incapacitated, a bit of an AoE effect there. Next, we jump into this L1 plus triangle as we slide through the floor and launch 3 enemies who seemingly look like they are partially inside one another, but there you go. 2 of them get knocked down as we go into some aerial combat. One of the new powers that Spidey has, probably from the symbiote suit, to not only knock this guy down to the ground, but also bounce him back up high enough so that you can continue your air combos, highlighting the aggression that Peter Parker has while wearing the symbiote suit. Again, is this aggression just completely the moment that you get in contact with the symbiote suit if he hasn't been using it for a long time? I thought, generally speaking, it was a bit more gradual, but maybe I'm wrong on that front. One of these symbiote finishers looks absolutely horrifying. Badass, cool, epic in all the best ways, but terrifying. And then for a subtle moment here, we get to look at one of the new enemy types, which is this Craven dog. But also, notice how you can use it as a throwable object. This L1R1 was always used to throw objects in the first game. And then just a second later, he explodes. So I'm assuming that if you were to throw him, he wouldn't explode because, of course, you shouldn't be... Spider-Man wouldn't be throwing exploding enemies into other enemies. Just doesn't seem like how they would go about, because that man would be dead. As brutal as Spider-Man is in this scene, it's not necessarily killing anybody. You have these new attacks highlighted by these red circles, or these red both with Spider-Man's counter as well as the enemy attack itself, that mean you can parry certain abilities. This is useful. We'll see that not only sort of opens the enemy, it not only saves you from taking damage, but it opens the enemy up for a follow-up attack. Again, brutal takedowns. And if you've watched this on your own, you've probably heard Yuri Lowenthal's performance where he takes on the deeper voice. He is a lot more aggressive with the way he vocalizes himself. So great attention to detail there. We get this sort of I am Groot ability. We saw him swinging them left to right before. Here with the L1 plus X button, able to simultaneously launch multiple enemies in the air, slam them down, incapacitate them all right off the bat. And take a note of some of the gadgets that they're using. We have this crossbow here. We saw the sword lady, some typical gun soldiers that we've gotten in the first game. Just take note of them. We'll bring it back up a little bit later. Crowd in the back, you will notice that they're kind of doing the same exact thing. Doesn't really matter. They're in the background. They're not even blurred. Although the depth of field, I do want to call out, is done really well. Even if we go back just a tad to these kind of scenes here. I know there's a lot of motion going on, but you could see how as things go off in the distance, they get this nice subtle blur effect that just helps the world look really, really well done. These guys kind of doing the same animation, even at the same time. These two in particular, swaying left to right. Small detail, but hey, just pay attention to everything that you can.
All teams converge.
Lizards across the river. I'm not gonna make it in time.
Seamless transitions highlighting the power of the PS5, able to load this environment that fast is absolutely incredible. Now, some people have commented, oh, but there's actually a pause because it stays on that screen for a little bit. I think that's just the developers trying to showcase that the prompt is there more than it's the actual time it takes to load. One interesting detail is the people in the houses you could actually see. So great job, Insomniac. One person looking out his window. Another guy looks like he's doing some stretches over here. So love the attention to detail in the world. And we get this new spider sling, and right away just flying through Manhattan so much faster than you could in the last game, and yet still the power of the PS5 and SSDs are absolutely incredible. You could see how all the NPCs below still loaded, seamlessly transition into this spider glide, rendering all of this in high detail. It's not even as though you're seeing textures really loading in all that much, which is what I was most impressed about as I sort of took this at a frame by frame peak, right? All the buildings off in the distance, nothing really popping in. Even if you look at the ground, it's amazing what these consoles can do. I was hoping to see some kind of nods in some of the buildings here, similar to in Spider-Man No Way Home, where you had some of the Iron Man graffiti talking about that. I'd love to see some things like Doc Ock was right, you know, put on the buildings. Unfortunately, maybe it's hidden away somewhere, but not quite here. You do have this cool eyeball, though, so there's that. And I just like the detail on the side of the buildings as well. Really makes the city feel lived in and alive. Not sure what circumstances will cause these wind gusts to come up. I assume maybe if you're going through an alleyway, it will trigger them, and then you could keep your speed boost with the Spidey glide, but curious. Either way, the distance that you were able to travel in that short amount of time is... I'm curious. I would love to see somebody try to do this distance, 1,000 meters, in Spider-Man 1 versus how quickly you're able to do it in Spider-Man 2. Love to see it. So let's get back ahead to where we were. The reason why I said take note of the enemies is as we see the shot of these guys sort of running by, you're getting some similar enemies already. So you have the sword person, this guy with the bow. I think this one also has a bow. So my question being, what exactly is the enemy variety in this game? Especially because some of them will function the same way, just shooting guns at Spider-Man the way they did in the first game. I think that variation is really important to keep it interesting. Even though, yes, I have these new powers at my disposal, you do need enemies that can kind of present different tactics and different strategies, and you need to work around based on these abilities that you do have. So curious what the ratio is of old to new and how that gets portrayed with Spider-Man 2, but raised a tiny bit of concern seeing a lot of the similar types here versus no new types being portrayed.
Can't let him find Connors, or he's done for.
This is one of the new enemies, some of the drones that the Kraven hunters have with that robot. And you can see the Miles Morales HUD now. It's visual and aesthetic differences, which I really like. The invisibility or cloak meter that's here. The unique powers under the L1 to Miles Morales. And then the shared gadgets with R1. One of the new abilities being able to put a tight walk or a spider web walk.
Don't engage alone.
This is cool. It reminds me a bit of the gadget in Arkham Origins, actually, which was very, very overpowered if you used it the right way. I forget the name of it. It wasn't the Batclaw. That's a staple, but can be used very... And here it seems like a little bit of the same, where you could very easily manipulate some of the stealth encounters by using it. Not complaining. It's just another tool set in Miles's arsenal, but there you go. It's going to be fun to play around with nonetheless. Curious about the blue lightning in this game compared to the orange lightning in the previous Miles Morales game. What caused the transition? Is it simply honing it, practicing it, infusing it with his gadgets to augment its power a little bit more? Who's to say? We'll have to find out. I really do like this shot for the lighting. You could tell it's very intentional. Some good game direction here as well. You do have the yellow that is kind of a signifier of the direction to go in, but also the way the lighting is shining directly on this point that's hinting to the player, hey, go here to progress. So you might want to look for those instances of where light is being projected if you're a little bit lost as to where you need to go. Subtle game and level design elements that can go underappreciated that need to be called out a little bit more. And also the way the lighting is done, you could see the subtle reflections of the yellow, especially as he starts pulling here. The reflections of the yellow in the light looks absolutely gorgeous. Of course, the reflections in the floor, but what always impresses me in games is how different surfaces reflect lighting differently, and that does seem to be the case here, at least at first glance. Love it. It's a miracle. Again, it's a miracle that games get made at all, and the fact that they look as good as they do, it's incredible. Crazy to think where it might go in the next couple of years. We're going to start skipping ahead just a little bit in a few seconds. However, here I think goes a long way. A, of course, to highlight the lighting once more and just the shadows and the reflections and how beautiful it is. But Insomniac's ability to create such different tones and atmospheres between different environments. And I hope, while this one is amazing at building up the tension, there's certain things I think could be done a little bit better. You know, for example, we have giant claw marks here, which give you some environmental storytelling, of course, what's been going through. You can actually notice that little tidbit of a shadow. They're trying to build the atmosphere, the tension, and it can go a long way to have, of course, these shadows sort of moving subtly. Things that you can miss off in the distance as you're crawling through so that you feel like you're being stalked. That would indeed be cool. But nonetheless, you get the little detail for a quarter of a second, the shadow moving out of the way before the barrel does come in and explode Miles out. So we're going to jump ahead just a bit here. Might give players a little bit of an idea where this takes place because Genki, Miles' assistant, guy in the chair, if you will, is controlling one of Kraven's drones. So some storytelling here. Again, just going to jump ahead because not too much goes on. And for the sake of time, we've already been going for 20 minutes. But this shot of Spider-Man falling down, absolutely horrifying and a sign of things to come. We're going to see plenty of teases later on. They really, Insomniac did maybe tease it a little bit too hard in this gameplay, if I'm being honest. But do also note the subtle eye movements in the suit to give expression on the characters as Miles is trying to investigate, look a little bit closer as what the hell this is. And it's horrifying.
Hey, man. New threats?
The building's swarming with hunters. Any sign of Connors?
Yeah. Genki's tracking him.
Hey, Mr. Parker. Mr. Spider-Man, I mean.
But the data's incomplete.
Okay, I think I got a lock.
Genki, wait! Be chill! That wasn't me.
Me neither.
I don't even have a stomach, so...
But I wanted to just let that scene play out, mostly because I really do like the way that Peter isn't necessarily being rude to Miles. He understands that this is still a friend. He's not being aggressive or outright just a dick, for lack of a better word, but he's just being dismissive. That's something that I saw in one of the comments in response to this trailer, and I think it's done incredibly well here, from the way the voice actors' performances are done to the dialogue and the writing itself. It's awesome. I like it a lot. And you could see, we're going to keep seeing the growing tension between these characters as the scene sort of plays out between them. There's actually a surprisingly not... I say this, there's not a lot going on with this scene in terms of something new that would take place between the first game and this game. You have a beautiful set piece moment. There's a lot going on in the scene itself, but not in the way of new mechanics or new gameplay, swinging, and this chase segment. Still exciting, still enthralling. I'm not holding it against the game. I don't want anybody to think that I'm complaining because it looks epic, cool, in all of the right ways, and I can't wait to experience it for myself. The takedowns look slick and sleek. The web swinging is also something to take note of. Miles Morales, between the game that featured him, the standalone Miles Morales game, I was about to say DLC, technically not a DLC, the standalone Miles Morales game versus this experience, you could see that there's a new confidence in his swinging. It takes a lot more after Spidey's did in that first game, and so you could see the character growth just from the animations alone, which is a phenomenal attention to detail.
Right! I've got the metal murder bird! I warned you about going after Connors! Now this is on you!
You could hear Yuri Lowenthal's voice acting to try to get that more aggressive, that angrier approach that the symbiote, the effect that the symbiote is having on him. And it does a very good job, again, from the design direction to the writing. All the parties here did fantastic. Spidey also has the ability for his glide, which is appreciated.
Spider-Man has got defenses!
And here, what's curious, I want to pause at the right moment, whether or not the symbiote is trying to protect its host, or if Peter is really in control of the symbiote. It's not really clear. And of course, that subtle change is something that's a big part of Symbiote and Venom as a character. So we have to see how it plays out throughout the story. But I'm really curious about that aspect of the game. And my prediction is ultimately the climax is going to grow between Miles Morales and Peter Parker with the symbiote suit on. I think Kraven is more just the pin or the match that sparks the fire. He is the incentivizer, the instigator, the tool to pull everything into action, but the main conflict is actually going to be driven by Venom and Peter Parker, the symbiote, and Miles Morales, and how they interact with one another. I will say I actually wasn't very impressed with this segment. If I had to criticize anything, this is the segment I would in particular. Looks a little bit tedious, a little bit monotonous, and a bit goofy, the way that Kraven's men just keep sliding into frame and getting thwarted by the Lizard. We do get a very good look at him, however. If we could pause at an ideal section, there's just so much movement going on. But Lizard's design, I think, looks really good. It's very appropriate for this universe, for this version of Spider-Man. And the growing difference between Miles Morales, especially in this scene, between Miles Morales and Spider-Man, is really apparent. Again, just might be overstating it, but it's done well.
Hey! Alley-oop on 3! Hi!
Spider-Man, you'll notice Spider-Man in this scene in particular, he immediately keeps continuing to chase after the chopper versus Miles, who's left to save the citizens.
1, 2...
There's the orange lightning that does come back in this scene. So where's the change between the two? What causes it? And as Peter Parker does go to save the civilians, I love the hesitation that he has. You could see it even with the animation where he looks like for even just half a second he might go back after Lizard to go get him. But he does do the right thing, which is good to see. Throws him on the ground, clearly angry that it is the reason for him losing Lizard. Doesn't ask for the civilians' help, but this is something, again, a lot of people have pointed out. Doesn't ask for the civilians' help. Doesn't ask if the civilian is okay. Just straight goes back to trying to figure it out.
It's good, Pete.
Here's also a subtle, important... Listen to the dialogue here.
He got away from us. It's good, Pete. I saved the tracker. Let's go, man, before he gets too far.
No. He's mine.
So there you go. The interesting nature of the dialogue, he got away from us. Is that a subtle nod that he's talking to the symbiote, or is that actually the symbiote talking through Peter, or is it him talking to Miles Morales? It's left a bit ambiguous, intentionally so. My personal take, a bit of what I said before, but the rising action is going to build up to Miles versus Spider-Man. We're going to see another really on-the-nose tease of that in just a little bit. That's going to be one of the climaxes. Then you're going to have a bit of a falling action, then your rising action again to the finale climax, which would involve Spider-Man and Miles Morales. Spider-Man now liberated from the symbiote suit, or maybe able to use the same powers, because you'd feel a bit less strong and a bit underpowered if suddenly you couldn't do all the cool things you've been doing for the majority of the game. So curious how that might play out. But once that conflict gets resolved, whatever the final villain might be, it's going to be Venom, right? The symbiote's going to move on, most likely to Harry Osborn, if we had to guess. That's what makes the most sense. Normally, we know in the comics it's typically Eddie Brock, but Harry also can take on the symbiote suit, and we're going to be going up against Venom, which is something to look forward to. That's going to be a badass fight, as possibly all your powers get taken away from you. Who's to say?
So do I.
And here, just another subtle detail that everybody noticed as he says, you know, he's going to go after him himself. The Venom eyes do come through and then adjust back to normal.
He's not normally like that, right?
No. He's never like that.
And there you have it. Finally, last but not least, if you didn't think that eventually it's going to be Miles versus a symbiote, here you have the original suit being taken over by the symbiote, then a blue electrical blast that we saw from Miles Morales erupt that away. Same here. Together gets covered up in a little bit. Blue lightning flash is what makes the symbiote retract away. And then finally the electric explosion with fall 2023. So in a lot of ways, not a lot. I did spend quite a bit of time trying to find. There wasn't an emphasis on Easter eggs in this one, or references in this one, or small things that you could pick apart. Really on focus, really on target, and clear, on the nose with everything it wanted to show you. Here it is, right in your face, front and center. Some of the events that are going to happen teased right off the bat. Maybe you wanted to keep that a little bit back in your pocket, but I do understand at the same time they wanted to highlight the cool new feature, which is definitively going to be the symbiote suit, alongside some things like the gliding and the faster mobility, of course, and then the story that's starting to pan out from this trailer alone. There's a lot, but also a little, if you get what I'm saying. Either way, I love this trailer. I thought it looked exceptional. Really looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be one of my favorites of the year. Let me know your thoughts. Are you excited? Not so excited? You think maybe it should do a little bit more different? Or you just don't really care for Spider-Man? Curious if you did. If you don't care for Spider-Man, then why would you be watching this video? Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.